Very few figures in cinematic history have gone through the vocational changes that Francois Truffaut has. Having been a delinquent and a deserter of the French army at a young age, Truffaut would be carried away from this life by André Bazin, who would go on to be his mentor and father figure in his 20s. André Bazin, who had pushed the auteur theory, would go on to co-found Cahiers de Cinéma, the first published film magazine. Cahiers de Cinéma employed a wide variety of young French critics who would push the auteur theory to the forefront of film in their post-critic years. In 1954, Francois Truffaut would go on to publish La Qualité Française, or The Tradition of Quality in some circles, which would criticize French cinema for being a redundant copy of Hollywood in literature, while heralding the works of Hitchcock, Renoir, Rossellini, and many others whom Truffaut deemed to be true auteurs that had developed a cinematic style of their own. This article would go on to create a dialogue and debate between the importance of the director and the cinematic stylings of the film the director was making. Not long after this, Truffaut would go on to help Italian neo-realist director Robert Rossellini work on a few projects, before working on his first cinematic short film, Les Mistons. Les Mistons could be perceived as a muse for his debut film The 400 Blows, the film that would cement himself as a filmmaker and got him a nomination for the Palme d'Or at Cannes, ironically the film festival that had denied him an invitation the year before. In his first legitimate voyage into the practice of an auteur, Francois Truffaut employed the politics of film he had established 4 years before. Treating the camera like a pen or camera stylo, he devised ingenious ways to give the mise-en-scène in the film his full attention. Like a true auteur, Truffaut based the main character of Antoine Doinel on himself, seeing a likeness in looks as well as personality. Jean-Pierre Lloyd, the actor who played Antoine Doinel, would work with Truffaut 6 more times after this. 4 of these 6 had Jean-Pierre return to the role of Antoine Doinel, which would go on to be an anthology of films based on Antoine's life, which paralleled Truffaut's own life, where the values of childhood, romance, passion, and loyalty played a huge thematic role in the scripts. It was true that the young critics from Cahiers de Cinéma were all on the journey to being auteurs and not just critics anymore. Funny enough, although Francois Truffaut's 400 Blows is regarded as the first French New Wave film, it's incorrect, as Chabrol had made A Beau Serge a year before in 1958, Eric Romer was filming The Sign of Leo the same year as The 400 Blows, and Jacques Rivette had started on his film Paris Belongs to Us in 1957, though not released till 1961. Despite all this, it was Truffaut's semi-autobiographic tale of a troubled boy in Paris that got the biggest acclaim, helped his next 2 films, Shoot the Piano Player in 1960 and Jules and Jim in 1962, become box office successes, and some of the few highlight films that would help push the French New Wave as the new revolutionary movement in cinema. Francois Truffaut and Jean-Luc Godard were at the front and center of the turn of the decade and for most of the 60s, becoming the new faces of French cinema, each one with their own opinions of how the movement worked, with Francois Truffaut deeming over 100 different filmmakers as part of the French New Wave, while Godard would say that the French New Wave was exclusive to the auteurs who belonged to the Cahiers de Cinéma. After his run of successful films and becoming an international tour de force, Truffaut would go on to show his versatility as an auteur by writing a book on one of his favorite auteurs already, Alfred Hitchcock. Truffaut would proceed with the idea of the book as a series of interviews conducted with Hitchcock. Together they would have a legendary dialogue that would discuss a multitude of topics, ranging from each one's upbringing, their opinions on techniques one uses in cinema, their writing, and so much more that these videos are scattered throughout the internet. Their dialogue would go on to be incredibly popular within the film community and was heralded as one of the greatest non-feature-based writings of Truffaut's career. Many filmmakers of New Hollywood such as Coppola, Spielberg, and Scorsese have spoken on interviews about the crucial element the book played into their careers. Not only did Truffaut seize the moment to have a one-to-one with one of the biggest names in cinema, but in retrospect, he left the world an epic series of interviews between 2 of the most influential figures in filmmaking that is still being read, talked about, studied, and has been made into a documentary. With that being said, Francois Truffaut left an incredible legacy and body of work in his 25 years as a filmmaker, proving to himself to be an artist first, as well as an exemplary critic and thinker. Truffaut championed realism, originality, and when it came to the auteur theory, led by example, having said once that the film of tomorrow will resemble the person who made it.